So I wanted to comment on an interview that Aidan Kearney made of a juror from the Karen Reed trial. So if you haven't watched the trial, that's fine. I'm going to talk about the mind archetype. But there's a very important aspect of that trial, which is that there were two witnesses who were actually hired by the FBI, who is who is investigating behind the scenes of it all because of all this mess. They know that Karen Reed is innocent because they hired some people to actually investigate the matter. I'm not going to go into details. But the thing that is driving people crazy is the fact that the jurors did not understand how important these two experts, the experts who testified about how it was impossible technically that the car would have hit the victim, and so that could never have happened. He did not die because of a car hit. The jury did not understand who these guys were because the lawyers who were defending Karen Reed, who was accused of murder, they were not allowed to mention that these guys were hired by the FBI. And so the only thing they were able to say was, "We did not hire you, right? And the prosecution didn't hire you, right?" So now in the article that was just published by Aidan Kearney, aka Turtle Boy, there's a juror who is answering the question about what did you think of these experts? Because to us, they were like definitive. They were saying, hey, this did not happen. It wasn't a car who killed this man. So it should have ended there. But the jurors were very confused. And actually, I made a video several weeks ago when the trial was happening. I made several videos. I made several comments because the prosecutor, and there's shadiness. For those who don't know the trial, there's corruption there in ways that I have never seen. This is the biggest trial that I have ever watched, beyond much bigger than the O.J. Simpson trial. The difference being that O.J. Simpson was actually guilty and he was famous. And in this case, the defendant is innocent and she's not famous, but the case is incredible. And the issue is that the jury did not connect the dots. They did not. So this juror said, I don't know who these guys were. We didn't know that we didn't know that they were witnesses coming from an FBI investigation because the judge did not allow that to be mentioned, which, by the way, is something that happens a lot. That's not weird in itself, but it's a shame because it's a big thing. The issue of this trial is that it should never have gone to trial in the first place. But the prosecutor spent 2 months and a half, which is a long time for a trial. Trials usually last like a week or two. 2 months and a half is a lot. And he took 2 months and a half, and then the defense just used like 2 or 3 days because they had amazing witnesses. But I said all along, the prosecutor is exhausting the minds of the jury. And I kept saying it again and again. This is how you see archetypes at work in real life. What happens when you're sitting there and you're supposed to pay attention? You will never be allowed to have transcripts of the whole trial. And by the way, after you finish 2 months and a half, do you think you're going to review all of your notes, even transcripts, if you had them? That's very unlikely. You're exhausted. Your mind is exhausted. And to have a prosecutor who was repeating again and again, what if anything? All of us in the chats when we were watching live and we were, making fun of the guy and then getting really upset. It was just exhausting. And I was saying, hello, this is a tactic. This is done intentionally. You repeat, you repeat, you repeat. You take a long time. And the mind checks out. This is archetypal. The mind is super important. You can do anything that you want if you know how to use the mind tricks. And believe me, that people who are corrupt and criminals, and other people too, they know exactly how to use mind tricks. And to me, I saw it all along. I said, There is a constant here, exhaustion. We were all so exhausted, but watching from home, we were able, to disconnect and to just say, okay, I can't listen to this guy anymore. Do you know why? Because the repetition of the what if anything and being so boring and using that voice that would put you to sleep, it's actually a hypnotic method. This is not some esoteric stuff. It's stuff that is used. It's stuff that has a purpose and intention. And I said it all along. And now you can see in the interview of this juror, and by the way, even right after the trial, there have been some information that the juror had never connected the dots about these experts who were completely exonerating the defendant. They never made the connection that these people were, important, or that they were hired by the feds or anything like that. And this juror in this interview, this article by Aidan Kearney, what he says, and you can see that on question 26, he said, for all I know, these people were just, people who were watching the trial and they wanted to offer their expertise. That's how they thought, because nobody was allowed to mention that there was an FBI investigation of all the shadiness that is happening and all these people trying to frame Karen Read, which is very obvious for people. I mean, there are people who have been following this for a long time. I was new to this and I saw it very clearly as well. There is a deliberate attempt to frame her. And there is corruption, the shadiness, incredible in this trial. So this is what I wanted to mention, that to say, if you understand how archetypes work, you can see it everywhere. And I just immediately knew this is not, a coincidence. 2 months and a half. I mean, how does the guy not get tired of hearing himself? And he was just repetitive. Because I explained it, I have videos about the mind archetype. The mind drops out. First of all, because it's tired, and also because at some point, you're just not interested. And this is the dynamic of the mind. This is what happens. And this is one of the tricks you can use. And to me, it was very obvious, because what happens when the mind drops out? Well, then you have the defense who finally try to make their case, either cross-examining a witness. The juror is completely exhausted. They're not even paying attention. And in fact, this juror said, I didn't even notice that one of the witnesses accidentally mentioned that it was the feds who were doing an investigation, because actually that witness did say it, but it was very quick. It was mentioned that there was another proceeding, but the jurors never knew, and they didn't connect that to the two guys who testified right at the end and exonerated completely the defendant. Why? Because they were tired. The mind drops out, because that's the nature of the mind. And the people, when, you can see people who deliberately do that. And by the way, if you watch trials, which is something that I always recommend, especially if you want to understand how the mind works, because you can see, first of all, how difficult it is to figure out the truth. To me, it's interesting on every level to watch a trial for so many reasons. But I have never seen such deliberate attempt at deceiving and exhausting the jury from the prosecution side. You would expect that from the defense side, because they usually, defend criminals. And so they're trying to use a lot of tricks. But this was the prosecutor, and it was blatant. But you're there, it was very hot inside the courtroom. So the jurors were like exhausted. There's a heat. And the guy was droning on and on. Everybody was commenting on that tone. It was hypnotic. Well, that's what you use in sounds. Can you think about, for example, when you're on a train and you have a it's the same sound. It puts you in that state where you're hypnotized. This is what it used in meditation and in relaxation techniques. I mean, there is no way that he didn't do this intentionally. Of course he did it intentionally. To me, it was obvious, because something that, goes on. And I explained in a video, when you watch point A and then you look at point B at the end, over a long period of time, and 2 months and a half in a trial is a lot, and you see that there is something there, you see an intention, because from A to B. And so everybody was shocked. Oh my God, the jury didn't guess that these guys, these experts who exonerated the defendant, they were from the FBI. Well, I thought that was difficult for them to guess that, to connect the dots. But most of all, and I said in all of my videos, which you can watch, they were too exhausted to do anything. They were just dropping off. And you can see that, read that article. Very interesting to see what a juror has to say. I mean, this is it. The mind archetype. Watch all my videos related to that. Very interesting.